Hi everyone, welcome again to another Teacher Joseph weekly lesson. Now, many of you have been asking me about Northern Ireland because although part of Ireland is British, the other part isn't. And it sometimes causes confusion because here in the UK, we sometimes just refer to Northern Ireland as Ireland or Belfast. And also the southern part of Ireland, the part that's not British, has nothing to do with Britain. It has its own government and it has its own management. So there's a lot of confusion about this. And so today we're going to read through a document about the history of Northern Ireland, what it is, and what it looks like from a British perspective. And we'll also talk about Southern Ireland and how that's very different. It's an EU country with its own uh, government and with an open border for the northern part. Now, this open border, you might say, that's very strange. Why would they have an open border with Britain, especially since Britain is not in the EU anymore? This is a very sensitive topic, and it's something which, during COVID especially, became a bit of an issue. But it's very political. And of course, the subject of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland has been discussed many times between the governments. They're two very separate entities. But let's have a look, first of all, at our story, and we'll see what it has to say about Northern Ireland. First document we're going to look at today, you can see there it says the history of Northern Ireland. We're not going to read through all of this because it's very political, dull, and boring. So we're just going to focus on the main parts. And you have a little map here of Ireland as well. So it says here Northern Ireland is one of the four countries of the United Kingdom, although it is also described by official sources as a province or a region, situated in the northeast of the island of Ireland. It was created as a separate legal entity on the 3rd of May 1921 under the Government of Ireland Act 1920. That's just a law. Now, let me just explain a little bit about the history of this, just so that you know. So basically, the whole of Ireland was one country, and in fact, it was occupied by the British. And for many different political and social reasons, in the 1920s and before, people were getting a bit bored of being ruled by England, especially since I think England had uh, been ruling them from Westminster. So they didn't have their own parliament and they were getting very upset. Food was very scarce. There were all kinds of issues. And you can read more about it if you're really interested. But basically, there was a war and the Irish threw the English out. Now, it's not clear exactly how they were able to do that, bearing in mind that it's a small country. There's various opinions, but anyway, there was a war and Britain was forced to leave. So as it went north, and you can see on this chart here, this is a map of Ireland, Britain was fighting, as it got to this part, it had more support from the UK because you can see it's very close to the UK. So they eventually kept a bit of the country. And so this part remained British and the rest of it became independent. Now, let me just scroll down a little bit so you can see what it says here. It says the new autonomous Northern Ireland was formed from 6 of the 9 counties of Ulster. So, yeah, there's all different counties here. So, it says here 6 of them, 6 of the 9 bits of the north. Um, they had unionist majorities. That means they wanted to remain in the UK. Antrim, Armagh, Down in Londonderry, and 2 counties with slight Irish nationalist majorities, Fermanagh and Tyrone. Now, let me just explain a little bit, okay? Because this sounds okay from history, but practically there's a problem here. Let me tell you what it is, okay? So both my grandmothers were Irish, but they were Irish before this British territory was held. They were Irish when Ireland was one country. Okay. So both my grandmothers were born in what's now Britain, but they were born when it was all Ireland. So as a result, many of us are able to access EU passports because we have Irish grandparents. And anyway, the South doesn't recognize the North. They're politically very tense and upset with the North. So if you're British with Irish ancestors, going back to your grandparents or great grandparents, you can actually get an EU passport. And in fact, at the time of Brexit, many people quickly looked to Ireland so they still could have access to the EU. So it's very interesting. It's a little bit complex because when my grandparents say they're Irish, they that was fine in the first few years, but as this divide kind of set in, they had to really admit that they were British because they were born in a British territory. It's a little bit like, India and Pakistan. Many people say, "Oh, I was born in India." But that became Pakistan, I think, in the 1940s. So it's a little bit confusing. It's all about identity. Anyway, let's continue because we want to go through more. And you can see here resistance to home rule. This is how the war started. It says here the majority of people living in Ireland wanted the British government to grant some form of self rule. To grant means to give permission. Okay. And there we are. I'm not going to go through all of this because it is dull, but you can find it here in Wikipedia, History of Northern Ireland. Okay. Um, by the early 20th century, okay, Belfast, the largest city in Ulster, had become the largest city in Ireland. And various bits were closely integrated with that of Britain. Also, it was Protestant rather than Catholic. You know that Catholicism, Catholic Church is a majority in Southern Ireland. So that meant that all of these things meant that it was quite easy for Britain to get the support of people in the north. It all came to a head. In other words, it all came to some kind of showdown or final in 1916 with the Easter Rising. And that's when there really was a big war, and I think they had destroyed whole chunks of Dublin. And the GPO, the General Post Office, was very famous at the time of the Easter Rising, as far as I know, anyway. Let's go on. Here we are at the partition, and there's Northern Ireland there, the Republic there, and there's no border. I'm just going to see if it mentions the border there. So if I just move down there, these are all just telling you exactly what happened. Northern Ireland, having received self-government within the UK under the Government of Ireland Act, was left alone just to do what it wanted. So it wasn't directly ruled by anybody. And there was a lot of violence, which I'm sure you've heard about. This here is just covering the different parts of the government. And then there was the Second World War as well. It was very famous because I think people in Northern Ireland were not, I think if I remember correctly, they weren't asked to fight in the war. So that was another big thing that happened. It's going into a lot of detail here, especially about the Troubles. That's the ongoing war between the North and the South. At the moment, they have a lot of peace, but well, it's very fragile, which is why that border remains open. You can see there's a lot of different time periods. And the Good Friday Agreement was when they finally found some peace because the Irish Republican Army were trying to get back the 6 counties. So they finally managed to agree something called the Good Friday Agreement. And by the time they'd done that anyway, the world was being overshadowed by Islamic style terrorism. So when it comes to Northern Ireland fighting about itself, it was kind of overshadowed by larger, more pressing world affairs. But they did eventually manage to find some peace, but there were certain conditions to the Irish Republican Army, that's the southern part fighting with the northern part. There were conditions, and one was about that open border. Okay, so you can see there it says increased government focus on the problems of Northern Ireland led in 1993 to the two prime ministers signing a declaration. Okay, um, and it says here a new leader of Irish, the northern part of Ireland, political party, David Trimble, was party to that. Okay, we don't want to go too much into the politics of it. Okay, but basically they got their own parliament. All right, it collapsed 2002 to 2007 because nobody could agree on anything, and at the moment it's up and running. A lot of very famous, loud voices all about this. Now, we're going to stop here because there isn't much left to tell you. But what we are going to do is we're going to look at life in the South as well as talking a little bit more about the British parts. So let's just have a look at that now. And we're over the worst of it. I don't like politics, and that page was thoroughly full of text, wasn't it? We're on to something more exciting now, which is the news website of the southern part of Ireland. It's called RTE. It's Gaelic. As you know, it's still an official language there. I think it's radio, television, Erin. And they have a Gaelic version of the site as well, which if you're interested, you can go and see. It's there somewhere, yeah, Gaelic. Okay, so this is the news website, basically. And I'm in the cultural section because the main part is just, well, like British news, very depressing, all about stabbings and tributes and politics. You'll notice that, interestingly, there's nothing about Britain in this news website. And why would there be? It's a separate country. But it's interesting because they have different news from the UK. What's very interesting about this, just passing comment here, Gardaí are making very good progress identifying people involved in a fight. So the government departments in Ireland are often called Gaelic names. For example, the police are not called the police, although everyone would know what you meant because they speak English, of course. They're called the Gardaí, Gardaí Síochána, the keepers of the peace. Okay, so they use Gaelic quite a lot in their daily life, at least with government departments anyway. I think that's changing now. And yeah, let's try regional and see what it says. Okay, here we are. Man rescued after getting stuck in a cave in County Fermanagh. Now, what's interesting here is the South don't recognize the North. So that means that all of the news here is a mix of North and South. They don't see any difference. They don't see any board there. They just talk about Ireland. It's very interesting that. Um, yeah, let's just choose one story here. Irish lecturer pursues 40-year equal employment battle. Um, okay, he's talking a little bit when Ireland joined the EU. We're not going to read the story. I just wanted to give you an example of the kind of thing that you'll find. There's a Gaelic word there. Let's click on that and see what it brings up. Yeah, you can see some Gaelic. In Ireland, they call it Gaelic or simply Irish. Okay, so this has nothing to do with Britain. All right. If you want something to do with Britain, what you need to do is to go to the BBC website and choose Northern Ireland. But since we're in the south and it's far more exciting, this is where we are. Of course, religious news there. The Catholic Church is kind of a big deal over there, isn't it? Yeah, here we are. They obviously had that terrible stabbing a few days ago, which I think we read at the top. Um, yeah, progress identifying those involved in a Dublin stabbing. Yeah, I lived in Dublin from 1998 until 2002. Yeah, stabbed on South Ann Street. Yeah, I've heard there's loads of immigrants there now. I don't know, and I don't know the history of this man either. It said, in light of this sad event, anyone who has been affected, IPAS has been put in place. Support for both residents and staff. IPAS is put in place. That means created, yeah. Support for both residents and staff. What's IPAS, I wonder? You see, because it's not British, I wouldn't know. The Ballyogan IPAS Accommodation Centre. Oh, it looks like it's some kind of place for people to live. There's Kwame Bubatunde. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but anyway. Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. So, yeah, this is really worth checking out. And if you're looking for an alternative to British news, RTE is really, really good. And they have loads of radio channels as well. Just like the BBC, only it's European. They have Gaelic, of course. They have classical music, alternative. They have their main radio channels. RTE radio and television are the same as the BBC, basically. And you can read about them there as well. So that's a little introduction to RTE. Now, we're talking today about the history of Northern Ireland. So let's just quickly go over to see what's been happening in the north in these last days. Right, so here we are back at the BBC News website. Now, you can see here in the homepage, I have England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Alba, Wales, Cymru local news, and my news. Okay, so basically, you're not going to have this menu because you're outside the UK, but you'll have something similar. If you use a VPN, you can recreate this. Alba is the Scottish Gaelic news website, so you can see there things which have been happening. Scottish Gaelic is still a big thing here. Yeah, you can see some of the things in Gaelic, and Wales is this one. Many people still speak Welsh as well. Here we are. Oh dear, I don't understand any Welsh, so it looks a little bit strange. Let's see then. So we're going to go to the Northern Ireland part. You will have something similar. I'm sure they'll let you access Northern Ireland news. Tens of thousands of birds being culled over suspected avian flu. To cull is to kill. To cull is to cut back severely. It doesn't always mean death. If you work for a company who culls its staff, it means it reduces the numbers. But here, I'm pretty sure this means death. Tens of thousands of birds being culled over avian flu. And then here's that same story we saw on RTE. Man stabbed to death in Dublin is identified. We saw that one as well. And yeah, they have their own things, as you can see here. Ulster don't have the answers at the moment. Is that sport, is it? Oh, yeah, it seems to be sport. Yeah, what I didn't tell you is that Southern Ireland has a national sport called hurling. That's kind of a big thing as well. I'm not sure if this is about hurling. There's a few sports over there. This might actually be something else. Let's have a little look. Michael Murphy was at the centre of instant drama on his return to Donegal. I don't know what they're talking about there. I don't know if that's hurling, Gaelic football, or shinty. It doesn't really tell us, which is quite naughty, isn't it? But if you like sport, you should like this. The Gaelic games are very different from British soccer. Okay, so I don't know what it's talking about there. Whether this is Gaelic football, maybe. Kind of looks like it. Oh, there's a woman. Yeah, I'd forgotten they have women teams now, don't they? Um, so let's just go back there for a second. Northern Ireland is the least diverse part of the UK. Well, there's no surprises there. Although with an open border, I thought it would be, but yeah, historically it was always a very brutal place to live because it was dangerous. Some women there with this letter, it says a lonely heart letter search for 1930s Valentine. Yeah, yeah, this is a big story. So back in the old days when the two sides were at war, there was a bombing in Omagh, and there's currently an investigation into what happened, and they're trying to find closure. Northern Ireland has its own BBC radio station called BBC Radio Ulster. It's very famous. It's a lovely station. Uh, yeah, the Irish are very friendly. So RTE does the south, BBC Radio Ulster does the north. Very nice if you're looking to explore the Irish accents. But anyway, they have a separate section for the Republic. And we're just what's this? Wexford athlete creating a storm in gladiators. Oh no, not my thing at all. Right, let's move back up to the top here. And we're going to go to the political section. Okay, so you'll see here, there's all kinds of things which still apply in Northern Ireland. For example, fireworks are a big part of British life. It's celebrations. They're not allowed in Northern Ireland. Political parties banned from some Northern Ireland Pride events, presumably because they're deemed dangerous. Let's have a look at that just to see. Organisers of some festivals in Northern Ireland, political parties supported a ban on the sale. Oh, this is all to do with the transgender people, isn't it? Yeah, there's a big debate in the UK at the moment about transgendered people and how they should be seen in the eyes of the law. And politically, it's incredibly controversial about who should get puberty blockers. That's medicine you can take to stop a child going through, that time when you're growing up, when you're fairly young and your body starts to change when you become a man or a woman. It's called puberty. So puberty blockers, that's medicine to stop you becoming a man or a woman in case you want to change your gender. Very controversial. So in December, the four parties in the Northern Ireland Executive, that's the Northern Ireland government, voted to introduce an indefinite permanent ban on the sale to anyone under the age of 18. Yeah, they're trying to bring in something similar here, although there are many, many trans people living here, so it's a very big thing, and some celebrities are getting involved as well. Okay, so let me just see what else there is. Yeah, one politician not attending St. Patrick's Day celebrations in the White House because she doesn't agree with Gaza. Yeah. Um, yeah, they have their own problems. This is the picture here of the Northern Ireland Assembly building. It's huge, isn't it? I don't know the history of that building, but that's their parliament. They're saying here they could get a pay rise, an MLA. I'm guessing that's their politicians, like our MPs, members of parliament. New plans to set pay levels for Stormont MLAs. Yes, Stormont is the name of the building. Like the central government's Downing Street, the Scottish government, they refer to it as Holyrood because it's in that part of Ireland. And here, this Northern Ireland government is called simply Stormont because I think it's Stormont House is that big house we saw a moment ago. Yeah, there we are. And it's saying here the assembly members. So that'll be members of assembly. I wonder what the L is for. Interesting. I'll need to find that out. Let me see. Because it says here they will take into account the salaries of MPs, TDs, that's the Southern Ireland politicians. That's a Gaelic name. I can't remember what it is. Senators in the, again, Irish Parliament. Uh, is it the Oireachta? Is that how they say it? Members of the Scottish Parliament is MSP, and the Welsh Parliament, they're called MSs. So, member of the Scottish Parliament, uh, members of the Synod, I think, for Wales, but I don't know where the L comes from, MLAs. So, it doesn't tell us there. Very complex. You see, just because I'm British doesn't mean that I know all this stuff. I don't like politics. When did MLAs last get a pay rise? Oh, well, it's a politicians, you know. Yeah, you know the deal with politicians, but let me just check what an MLA is before we finish, okay? I think that would be a nice ending, wouldn't it? MLA, Northern Ireland. Let's have a look. Yes, of course, members of the Legislative Assembly. So we have the members of the central government parliament, members of the Scottish Parliament, members of the Welsh Synod, and this one, members of the Legislative Assembly. That's what it's called, isn't it? Very controversial, I tell you. They know how to fight, the Irish. They fight about everything. They're worse than we are, really, and that's the North and the South. Yeah, there we are. O'Neill, she's the current Irish leader, Northern Irish leader, I should say. And she is to meet the King at Windsor. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, she's representing Britain, but strangely, she was born in the South. She was voted in, so the signs there of unity. You can read all about her. Her name is Michelle O'Neill. And that's it. Well, we'll end there. So that's Northern Ireland. You can see not the friendliest of places. I love the mountains. Yeah, so both my grandmothers were Irish. They both came from the north, but not when the north was north, when the whole thing was united, and they came from two very bitter cities. I think one was from a very strong, harsh Catholic community, and the other one was the complete opposite. Yeah, two very different people. And of course, they hated each other. So very interesting. Yeah. Lots of Gaelic words there as well. So yeah, this is very confusing, especially for those of you who don't really know too much about how the government here works. So this is the uh, Northern Ireland news from the BBC. We already looked at the RTE news, and yeah, that's us for today, I think. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Lots of new things for you to learn there about a part of Britain that, well, even I don't know much about, especially these days as politically it gets its own identity. Right, see you all soon. I hope you've enjoyed this. Join me again, and if you've enjoyed this, please do press the like button. Subscribe to my channel. It would be lovely to have you here permanently. Right, see you all. Take care and bye.